Unfortunately, where I think we are lacking focus is on the custody angle, because we still allow custody done outside of the Canadian jurisdiction. That brings a varying degree of risk to the underlying consumer or user. One of the glaring gaps that I see in terms of supporting Canadian organizations actually is in digital asset custody, by the simple fact that Canadian companies can choose to work with providers in other jurisdictions. Now, to be clear, this is the only asset class that we have in Canada that's allowed to do so. For every other company that offers financial services, custody needs to be done locally or with a local entity. And somehow, because of probably the, immaturity of the digital asset ecosystem, we're allowing other jurisdictions to service the Canadian market. I think that's a gap, and that's a gap that needs to be addressed for various reasons. We would argue that one of the gaps that needs to be addressed is closing the Canadian border when it comes to digital asset custody, for the reason of access to data rights, security, what happens when you have a failure. Some might argue that, well, no, the US has a very clearly defined framework and it works. Well, I would argue if it works, then how come you had 2 failures of custodians in 2023 alone in the US? If it was such a robust, well thought out process, then Fortress Trust and Prime Trust would not have failed. We need to consider those things when making our decisions. There's a question of framework, there's a question of laws and regulations governing the entity, there's a question of how much transparency is actually handed out to the regulators. Prime Trust sent assets to the wrong wallet for over 2 years. So when you think about transparency, not only transparency, but verifying that the trust was doing what it was supposed to be doing. I mean, it kind of is baffling to know that nobody picked that up.